a backdrop to consideration of international judicial organs is the limited reach of customary international law and treaty-established international law. It brings us back to the discussion of the UN General Assembly and the importance of reform to enhancing the legitimacy of and reach of the General Assembly, which is really crucial. But let me recount, take just the high points of Joe's presentation of international judicial organizations.
We're talking about the paper now.
Are you hearing me?
We're hearing you fine. Someone was just, some group was just talking.
Oh.
Nancy, if you would mute everybody, the recording would be better if we just looked at Evan.
Okay, I'll mute all.
Yeah.
And then I'm sure I need to unmute Evan.
The Permanent Court of International Justice, which was established in 1921 and superseded by the International Court of Justice in 1945. The International Court of Justice was actually established as part of the UN Charter. It has universal membership. However, only 67 members of the International Court of Justice have accepted what's called compulsory jurisdiction. In other words, other states can ignore, if they choose, the findings of the court and have no obligation to enforce them, and they've done that. This court, betrays its history as a traditional interstate mechanism so that individuals, corporations, NGOs, and other non-state entities may not bring cases, only states. The Security Council of the UN has the right to enforce decisions, but it hasn't exercised it, not even once. Mm-hmm. So the International Court of Justice authority really depends upon a voluntary compliance in most cases. However, the 15 justices do represent all parts of the world. Cases sometimes take years to adjudicate, and it's picked up in recent years, but the average is only 2 cases a year. Kind of a notable events, I think, are in 1955, there was an opinion that the use or even the threat to use nuclear weapons was illegal under international law, and that the wall in Israel is also in contravention of international law. But not of a single long-term dispute by a major or even a middle-level power has been brought before the court, no less settled by it. So, there has been some progress in broadening the recognition of entities, actors in the international sphere. So the court has recognized the United Nations and numerous other international organizations as international legal personalities. And as such, they and other international organizations, some subsequently created, such as the World Trade Organization, can interact autonomously in states that were unthinkable in the earlier purely Westphalian, when the Westphalian Treaty was the major regime. They can also interact with one another as shapers of customary international law and occasionally as judicial bodies. That's there is, if I may kind of comment, there's a kind of a super state of formed by this network of international organizations that's not directly accountable to the public. It may be indirectly accountable in many cases, but not directly. So it's all the more important, I think, to embody democratic representation as directly as feasible in these organizations. Some of these are the International Labor Organization. Half of its 56-member governing body is elected from among its member states. And complaints to the International Labor Organization can come from member states, workers, or employer delegates. Then there's the World Trade Organization, which was founded in 1995. Its membership includes 153 states, which collectively account for 95% of international trade. And without a doubt, the World Trade Organization, according to Joe states, has had an enormous influence in expanding world trade and lowering transaction costs. Nevertheless, it has come under widespread criticism for systematic bias in favor of multinational corporations at the expense of labor and the environment. Another international organization that has some judicial components that Joe covers is the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea, which was created in 1996. Membership includes 157 countries as of 2009, plus the European Union. And I might add, China is a member, but the US is not. And as a consequence, disputes in the South China Sea are not being adjudicated by the Law of the Sea Treaty, nor are disputes with Russia in the Arctic, because the US is not a member. The process at the International Law of the Sea Tribunal is not only open to members, that is, say, states parties, but to other actors as well, including natural and juridical persons and state enterprises, which is interesting. There are other judicial bodies that have been established, regional courts, particularly within Europe. In Europe, there are two main courts. One is the human rights cases are the responsibility of the European Court of Human Rights, which is an organ of the Council of Europe, whose jurisdiction extends to all 57 member states of the European Union. And individuals do have access, direct access to the court. The European Court of Justice is responsible for interpreting European law, and in the less inclusive European Union, now the 27 states, I guess, that are part of the customs union. In 1979, following Europe's lead, the OAS, the Organization of American States, also established a regional court, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. And the OAU, the Organization for African Unity, has authorized a court on human rights and people's rights, but that is yet to be set up and implemented. So Joe, in his book, makes a number of recommendations, which I think are really important and ones that we can work on. First of all, is his suggestion that the International Court of Justice position itself and be granted a right to engage in judicial review of the legality of actions of other components of the world's judicial system and agencies within the UN system. In other words, to act as kind of a supreme international court with some oversight over other judicial bodies. And obviously, then one part of what it would look at is to see that other judicial bodies don't overstep their bounds. He also recommends that the International Court of Justice should focus on important cases that pose serious threats to international peace and security. That's easier said than done, I'm sure. He suggests that courts in general should seek to enhance access to adjudication by non-state parties, particularly international governmental organizations and international NGOs. And he also suggests that the Security Council should be authorized to assign a dispute to whatever court it deems best suited to deal with it, or where feasible to mandate compulsory mediation or arbitration. And finally, that the UN General Assembly can also promote establishment of new regional and sub-regional courts, especially human rights tribunals. And I might add that people forget that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is also a part of the Charter and something that every member state agrees to. There are a lot of individual rights in here that could be asserted in a judicial forum if there were one available. So that's a quick overview of Chapter 7.